And we're just going to take all the pieces off the board. Now we're going to practice playing out a small game blindfolded, okay? Bye-bye pieces. So, first of all, we're going to see if you guys can play through a short game in your heads. All right, I'll reset the board. All right, guys. It's time to calculate what's the best move for white. What? You can't see it? Here, I'll make it easier for you. There we go. All right, so we're going to start with a very short game, just to see if you guys can play it out in your heads. It's true, he is quite angry. Very intense. The Ben Kingsley version of a teacher in that move, he should be kept away from kids. Should not get that mad. Should not get that mad at a 7 or 8 year old or whatever he was. All right. Anyway, here we go. Our game is indeed going to start with e4. All right, e4. I'll make the moves for you guys with arrows, but other than that, you're going to have to keep this in your head on your own. e4. Black plays e5. All right, you guys in serious mode, quit laughing. Quit laughing. And just put this position on the board, okay? e4, e5. Everybody got it? If you're struggling already, raise your hand, and we can slow down and try and help you. e4, e5. That's where we're at. King pawn's up. Okay. If you have a problem... Oh, you are raising your hands, Daster? Oh, you're just kidding again. No more laughing, folks. Let's do this. Okay. If you're having a problem seeing e4, e5, and you're not telling me that you're having a problem, then that's your first problem, that you're not willing to admit to any weaknesses or anything like that, right? But hopefully most of you are with me here at e4, e5. So now what we're going to play is we're going to play knight f3 for white. It's the most common move here. And you do this while falling asleep. Yeah. And the more obsessed you get, Ram, the more it's going to just keep going, even when your eyes are closed and you're asleep. You'll be in your bed and you'll still be like going through this game in your head. All right, so knight f3 is played. Now, I find it very useful to ask yourself some questions about the positions as you're playing blindfolded, because that helps make sure that you still actually know where all the pieces are, right? Like you can sometimes just keep track of like, oh yeah, e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, knight e5. Like you may think you sort of like know that position or something like that, but are you really like seeing that position the way you would if you were actually looking at chess or playing chess? Are you actually seeing like what the position is, where the moves are, who can move where, who can attack what, and all that, right? That's a big question there. Oh, hey, Arturus. Good to see you. Thanks for coming by. Our goal today is to teach a bunch of people to read a chess book without a chessboard. It's a couple people last night on my stream said that was their goal, to be able to just sort of like take chess books with them and read them without setting up a chessboard. So we're going to see if we can do that today. We're going to see if we can get 800 rated players, and players of all ratings, but even beginners. We're going to see if we can get everyone to be able to just read a chess book without a board. So if you don't think you can do it, great, try anyway. You may be surprised. You may be surprised. We'll find out. All right, we got an 800. We'll find out if it's doable. All right. So you guys, let's ask a couple questions about the position we're at. For those of you who missed the first couple seconds, we're at e4, e5, knight f3. So what I want you guys to get in the habit of doing to check that you're really seeing the position, or whether it's by seeing it or just by knowing where everything is I want you to start asking yourself questions about the position, like, what's the knight attacking on f3? Right? What does knight f3 do to the scope of the queen on d1? How many squares can the queen on d1 move to? All right, Silky Yeti, you should be able to do it for sure. All right. So we're going to make sure that you guys really, really have mastery over this position every time we make another move. We're going to make sure you really have mastery over the position before we play the next move, right? So knight f3 is played. What is the knight on f3 attacking? You guys can answer this question. What's the knight doing on f3? Charlie's answering the question about the queen. She's only got one move she can go to, right? The queen on d1 is blocked by the knight on f3. She can only go to e2. Okay, let's say black didn't defend the pawn on e5. Is white threatening to take knight takes e5? Like, if white played knight e5, would that win the pawn on e5, or would black have a counter? How many things does white have hanging? How many undefended things for white if white got to play again and played knight f3 to e5? Do you guys think that black has any move to win back the pawn? Do they have queen g5 or queen e7 or queen d4 or anything? There would probably be queen e7, right? Because the knight on e5 would be undefended and the pawn on e4 would be undefended, right? White would have two undefended things. So the move queen e7 might well win back a pawn for black, right? So knight f3 sort of like, it pseudo attacks this pawn on e5. The pawn's undefended, and black probably doesn't want to bring their queen out to try and win back a pawn. Now, this stuff is not like necessarily earth-shattering chess stuff, but asking yourself some random questions like this will help you to really be solid on the position that you're imagining in your head, right? And as Infallibility is saying, the rooks on h1 and a1 and h8 and a8 are all hanging as well. You guys want notation. There isn't really any notation here, but we could try to do that. How would I do that? Yeah, Marco, if you can't see a board in your head, you're not alone. I can't see a board in my head, but I can still play chess blindfolded by just keeping track in my head of where all the pieces are and what they're doing. We could just have a text layer, yeah. Okay. All right, so we're at e4, e5, knight f3. We've talked about what's going on with the piece. We've asked ourselves some questions. Now black plays knight to f6. To answer your question, Daster, after knight f3, if black doesn't defend e5, it's always okay for white to take the pawn, pretty much. Because, you know, queen e7, knight f3, queen e4 check, bishop e2 is not going to be bad for white. Black doesn't really want to leave the pawn hanging. But here, knight f6 is played. Okay. Ask yourselves whatever questions you want on your own this time, or maybe I'll do it one more time and then next time you can do it yourself. So I'll ask you a question. What is the knight on f6 attacking? How many squares can the rook on a8 move to? None, right? How many squares can the rook on h8 move to? How many squares can the king rook move to? 1. The knight's gotten out of his way. Okay, let's say white wanted to attack the f7 square of black. How many white pieces can get to f7 in 2 moves from here? Which white pieces could get to f7 in 2 moves? Can the rook get there? Can the knight get there? All right. The answer is 2, the bishop or the knight. The knight can get to f7 in 2 moves through e5 or g5. The bishop can get to f7 in 2 moves through c4. Okay. Great. Okay, I think you guys see the position. White now plays knight takes e5, taking that pawn. Knight takes e5. All right, so now ask yourself some questions to see if you see this position very clearly in your head. e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, knight took on e5. Ask yourselves your own questions like I do. You know, pick a random bishop or a pawn. Ask yourself where it can move, what squares it controls. Just check where things are. Sometimes when I'm playing blindfold chess, I start to feel, or I'm like reading a book without looking at a board. Sometimes I suddenly start feeling like a little like fuzzy or confused, right? And it's easy to let it like slip away. But when it starts to feel fuzzy or confused, even for me, what I still do is I ask myself questions. I say, well, where is the queen's knight? How many times has it moved and where is it on the board? Okay, and from there, like, what's it doing? Right? Okay, what about white's queen bishop? What did that guy do this game? You know, what was his trajectory? What was his career? Has everybody asked themselves at least one or two questions about what's going on in this position, where the pieces can move to? Super. Black's going to play the same move as white. Knight takes e4. Sometimes you can keep track of stuff based on bigger chunks, right? Like right now, one thing you could use to keep track of the position more easily is that the position is symmetrical so far, right? Like white and black have played all the same moves, which is also called the copycat, as Badminton says. So any shortcuts like that like give you like chunks that tell you what has happened makes it easier to remember, right? Some of you even know this position, right, as some kind of Petrov copycat trap. Some of you even know the position. That makes it like very easy to orient yourself to that position, right? All right, I'm going to keep going. Just call out in chat if you're struggling, if you ever need me to stop or whatever. Very good, Daster. Yeah, you can just switch the e4, e5 pawns into knights. And now keep track that the bishops and queens can move on their diagonals, right? White plays queen e2. I don't know how to make a podcast, say chess. All I know how to do is make a stream. Daster, can the bishop move from c8 to f5 right now? Great. Good answers. You guys ask yourself one or two other questions about this position, right? Like, can the bishop on f1 move? How many squares does the white king have open right now? Okay. So the queen's attacking this knight, and black's going to play knight back to f6 here. You guys all seem to be seeing this. I could go faster. I don't need to go this slowly. All right. You guys all seem to know what white's going to do. That's a part of the trick, Silky, yeah. And as you get better, you need to do that less and less. But as I said, even I will still do that sometimes to make sure that I'm clear. And, as you get more used to it, you'll be able to do it better. And need to ask yourself less questions less often. All right, so knight c6, check. That's the next move. Knight c6. Right, and this is a very short game. We're going to now resign for black. And to answer Coffee Gambit's question, as many as you have time for, Coffee Gambit, setting aside 15 minutes for tactics, every other minute in the day that you have that you want to spend on chess, you can play games with. Yep. But look, we're starting with an easy example. Some of you guys are like 2000 and know all of this, right? But this is going to be difficult for Caitlin Codes and some of the other new players, right? I have to start here with a 4 or 5 move game. I'll crank up the level over the course of the next 2 hours, guys. Everybody's going to get a turn to clutch their heads eventually today. All right. So, Caitlin, do you see, or anybody else who's sort of at a difficult point here, do you guys see this final position with the knight on c6? What you want to do, if you can sort of get to this position but you're struggling with it, is ask yourself more questions about this position, right? Like the knight on c6. How many black pieces could capture this knight if black weren't in check? Where did the black knight on e4 go to? I forget. Like, we took on e4, but now we're not on the e file anymore. Where did our knight go? So, for example, one answer to this question is that the knight on e4 went back to f6. So there's nobody on the e file between the queen and the king. Right? Then you can ask yourself, as I said, how many pieces could take this knight if black weren't in check? Well, their knight on b8 could take it. Their pawn on b7 could take it. And their pawn on d7 could take it, right? Because none of those pieces on the queen side have moved. You've got a block of 8 here, which I think you can remember because none of them have moved. That's a pretty easy chunk of pieces to remember, right? They're all on their starting squares. The 8 queenside pieces. That's a chunk, right? As you achieve mastery, you think of things in chunks. Right? So that's black's queen side. It's just a chunk of 8. Black's king side is the knight has moved out to f6. Right? So there's one thing missing here from the chunk, from this 3x2 chunk. Right? There's one empty space. This pawn has been lost. The king is here. And this knight that's missing went here. So the queen side chunk is intact. The king side is the only thing that black's moved. And it's really just a pawn and a knight a bunch of times. The pawn is gone, and the knight is on f6. It's normal square. It's most popular square. Okay, great, Daster. So you want to work on that a little bit with questions like this, right? Is this bishop, or how many squares is this bishop attacking? Right? So starting position, and black's just moved the e-pawn, right? When black moves the e-pawn, how many squares does the bishop attack? And what are the names of those squares? Yeah, you're focused on it, Caitlin, and the stuff at the edges seems fuzzy to you because you're not focused on it, but if you ask yourself what's on the edges, if you go around square by square around the edges and ask yourself what's there, I think you can answer that question, right? We've got this game here, this 5-move game, right? And what you can do is there's this area that seems fuzzy to you, right? Just start at like a6 and ask yourself, is there anything on a6? And you're like, well, no, nothing ever moved to a6 this game, right? And then you ask yourself, what might be on a7? You say, well, the black pawn. I mean, black hasn't moved it yet, so it's still got to be on a7, right? What's on a8? Is there anything there? There must be a rook because it's never moved, right? You can actually, there's like an area that you think you can't see, but if you just ask yourself what's there and peel back the layer, you will actually be able to tell yourself and see what is there. You can absolutely know it. Extreme 112, very, very important for being able to play chess blindfold, is to really be fluent in all the squares and their colors and what happens on all those squares. You know, like when I tell you the square A6, you know, do you know that it's a light square? Do you know that it's on the A file? Do you know that it's on the 6th rank, meaning it's where like a pawn would have to move one square up? Do you know that it's a square that in the beginning of a game is often controlled by a knight on B8 and a bishop on F1? And in this exact position right here, it's the white queen that could take on A6, not the bishop. The bishop's blocked in by the queen. Okay, you'll get to know them over time. Just the longer your light squared and dark squared bishops sail the seas, you'll gradually know which squares each bishop has been to. It just comes with experience. Those of you who don't know the colors of the squares have been probably playing for 1 year or less. And somewhere between between the end of your first year and the end of your third year, you'll know where all the colors are. JB already knows more than most TV producers or commercial producers, right? He knows that A1 is black. Somehow, amazingly, in commercials where people try and place a random chessboard somewhere in the scene, they seem to get that wrong more than 50% of the time. I don't know how. What color is E7? It's a dark square. The black king is on E8, which is a light square. The bishop on F8 and queen on D8 move through E7 on their dark square diagonals. H4 dark, C5 dark. Yeah, Marco, one month and 10 days. It's the beginning for you. You'll get there. All right. Shall we move on to a harder game? You guys clear on this technique that if some area becomes fuzzy to yourself, just ask yourself questions about it and you might realize it, right? Like you may not know what's going on the edge, but if I tell you what's on A4, you guys could tell me, well, nothing's moved over there, right? What about B5? Nobody's moved there this game either, right? So that stuff's all empty. Empty, empty, empty. Oh, no, there's a knight here. Empty, 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 empty. The last move was knight C6, right? Empty, 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 empty. Because, like, nobody's moved any queenside pieces yet this whole game. All right. So, here we go. We're going to do a new game now. Actually, let's make it even more of a unusual closed opening. C4. So we're starting over. Reset everybody on their starting squares. C4. Very few of you play 1C4 games, so that'll be good. You guys good? Black's going to respond with c6. So ask you guys stuff like, what squares are the queens attacking now after c4, c6, right? What squares are the queens on d1 and d8 attacking? Or ask yourselves, who controls d5 how many times, right? Like, is Black ready to play d5 or not? Is White attacking d5 enough times to be a problem for Black? DM Hokey, I've never tried to like learn any trick like that, because to me that's not like chess stuff. It's not like some other way to try and remember something about chess. I wouldn't worry about knowing it, just it'll come when it comes. So just play chess and you'll gradually know the colors of the squares and stuff. Not too worrisome for Black. Black's got d5 defended by their c6 pawn, and if they play d5 by the queen. So Black is ready to play d5. White played g3 here. c6 pawn is blocking the knight on b8. Yeah, what squares can the knight on b8 move to? What are all the squares the knight on b8 can move to? Yeah, Colin, this game's not going to be much longer than the last game, but it's going to be a totally different opening. So it's going to take a different set of people out of their comfort zone, maybe. The knight on b8 can only go to a6. That's the only square available to it, because Black has pawns at c6 and d7 right now. Right, so this piece here can only go to a6. Okay, so White plays g3, and Black plays d5. So Black plays d5, and now obviously we would want to check again, like, how many pieces are attacking d5? How many pieces are defending it? I think you guys already sort of know how many pieces are attacking and defending it, right? There's two defenders, the c6 pawn and the queen d8. One attacking piece, the pawn on c4. Okay, Dasser says the pawn on c4 is not defended. So does Marco. Very good. Very good. So the pawn on c4 is actually hanging. So if White played a developing move, Black could consider taking it. Right? And you could ask yourselves here, okay, the pawn on c4 is hanging. How many White pieces could defend the pawn on c4? This is a great question. Make a list for yourselves. What are all the White pieces that on this move could defend c4? I'm not saying Black's threatening to win a pawn. You have to defend the pawn. It's just an exercise for seeing the position, right? Which White pieces could defend c4 right now after Black's d5 move? Knight a3 is one of them. Yep. So this knight here is one of them. It could go to a3 to defend that square. The b pawn, the c pawn, the queen, the knight, and if the e pawn moves, the bishop will defend c4. You counted correctly, Daster. It is 5 things. Knight a3, b3, d3, and the queen. That's right, Caitlin. You're just missing the bishop on f1. It can defend this pawn, not by moving itself, but by having its e pawn move to e3 or e4. Yeah. Very good. Very good, everybody. All right. So we've got many ways to defend this pawn, but white just going for kind of a simple game. You guys will thank white for this since you're trying to do it blindfold. White just takes the pawn on d5. Makes sense, Daster. Makes sense. All right, so which black pieces could recapture here? C or queen. Yep. Now let me ask you some random questions around the edges. What's on h5 right now? What's on h5 in this position? Nada. Okay. What's on g7? G7 has a pawn. Black hasn't touched their kingside yet, right? This whole thing is a chunk for the moment, right? They've only moved these pawns. So G7 has a pawn. What's on F5? Nothing, 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 nothing. Good job, guys. What about G2? What's on G2? Ho ho, I didn't trick you guys. Nothing. G2 is a hole in white's position for the moment. The dust of the G3 pawn. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, what's on G1? I tried to trick you, but you got it. I'm showing you that you guys can keep track of all of this. A knight. Okay, super. What's on B2? Pawn. Okay. C8. Great. You guys got it. Okay. Black recaptures the pawn with C6, D5. Do some of you guys notice that if black had taken with the queen would have been attacking a hanging rook on h1? I think a couple of you noticed that that diagonal was like super open. And even though c6 pawn is there to stay in the center, there is this move that you have to like have your eye out for, right? That the queen could attack the rook. But, you know, white would be able to save the rook with knight f3, which is a perfectly good square for the knight. And then black would be wondering why their queen was on d5 instead of a pawn. Okay? So black took with the c pawn here. C takes d5. And now white's going to play bishop g2. What opening is this? It's kind of like a Reti against a Slav defense, I would say. A Reti or an English against a Slav. All right. Take care, badminton. All right, white's got a fianchetto here, yeah. Okay, so you guys, is d5 hanging or not? Is d5 now threatened or not? You guys are right. Or most of you are right. It's protected by the queen, right? We've only got one attacker on it. One defender. So black develops the bishop next. Outside the pawn chain. I don't want to bias you guys too much, but black's plan is to put a pawn on e6 to keep d5 well defended against this bishop. That's why c6 and d5 were played. Black wants to play e6 to defend d5 more, but doesn't want the bishop inside the pawn chain. So bishop f5, bishop g4. How many moves could black play to get the bishop outside of the pawn chain before playing e6? How many squares does this guy have? Dastro's secret talent is on any yes-no question, he can get the right answer by the second guess. All right, 2 good ones that don't blunder, and technically a third one on h3. If I develop my bishop to h3, what white pieces could capture me? Let's say I was blindfolded, or I was playing bullet and I mouse slipped, or I was playing bullet and I was hoping my opponent pre-moved, or I was just a complete moron, which I already implied with my previous what-ifs, and I play bishop h3. Which white pieces could punish me for that? The knight or the Bishovsky? That's right, Scott. You've got Jesse flowing through your veins now. The knight or the Bishovsky could get me on h3. Okay, so we've got 2 good squares, f5 and g4. Black chose bishop g4. Okay. All right, real quick. What's on f3 right now in the position? Let's just check a couple squares for you. What's on f3? Nada. Niet. What's on e5? Rien de rien. What's on b8? Le chevalier, un caballo, the knight. Slon. Slon. What's on c8? Right next to the knight. Nishta. Ooh. They saw the trick. It's empty. We moved it. Dubov and Carlsen are playing each other? Right now, Lolly? What? Are you sure? Hey, Dubov won at least 1 game here against Magnus. Looks like he lost another game against Magnus. Wait, he won some games today. Oh my god. I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Blindfold lesson aborted. No, don't worry. I'm gonna stay true to you guys. I'm gonna stay true to you guys. Dubov just won that end game. Oh man. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Is it this endgame here? Opposite colored bishop endgame? Oh man, how do you win this endgame here? Oh, the king comes in. Check and resigns! Yes! Unbelievable. Unglaublich. All right, so you guys are right. There's nothing on c8. It's already left. Do you guys still remember this game after the interruption? You guys still remember after the interruption? How many pieces are attacking or defending the pawn on d5? Magnus blundered his queen in 2 different games today? I would expect Dubov to be able to win if that's the case. The interruption was all part of the plan, Daster. This is top teaching technique you guys are facing here. 1 attacker and 1 defender. Very good. Their names are bishop g2 and queen d8. Hola, estoy Bishovsky g2. Oh my wadarida. Watashi wa ren d8. D8. Your favorite piece is the bishop on g2, right? He's slick. He's slick. All right. All right. Lost the game in your head. Yeah, that can happen, Scott. So a good exercise for you, Scott, is if you take like a 5 or 6 move chess game that you want to memorize, play the first 2 to 3 moves in your head. You know, maybe you're like reading them out of a book, right? So the book goes, whatever, this isn't starting from a starting position, so it won't make any sense. But anyway, this book goes, you know, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, d5, c4, c6, right? Stop right there. Go change a diaper, okay? Go change a diaper, then pick up your book again and see if you still remember the position you were at. Then you're really good. Then you're really good. All right, so bishop g2, bishop g4. Now things get heated. White plays queen. Charlie's got another idea. Play the first 3 moves in your head, go lose a game to him, then see if you can still remember the position and how to play chess. All right, so queen to b3 is played. That's the next move from white. What's on g5 right now? What is on, you guys are right, there's nothing there. What's on g4 right now? Bishop, great. What's on h4? Nishta. Nishta. The only word I've learned today is nishta. Thanks to Batman. What about this chunk here on the king side? Has any part of this chunk been disturbed yet? Can you guys tell me if there's any piece of this 2x4 chunk that has been used yet this game? Or is the chunk undisturbed? Nishta and nishto. The chunk is just chilling, right? Black is not planning to castle kingside this game. And spoiler alert, they do not. This game never reaches the point of black castling. So that's just a chunk. It's doing nothing. Easy for us to keep tabs on that chunk. You know, if we ask ourselves, nope, nothing. All right, so white's queen just moved to what square again? Shoot, I forgot. Help me out, somebody. Where did white move their queen? Oh, man, I know she starts on her own color, right? Where did she go to? Oh, b3. Thanks, folks. Thanks, folks. All right. Now, tell me every single square on the board that the queen on b3 is controlling right now. What is every single square she is controlling? I'm out, David. It just got too hard. That's annoying. That's a lot of typing. Bye. So just, by the way, technically the queen's not controlling the square that she's on herself, right? It's every square that she's controlling. So it includes something like a pawn on b2 that she's defending. She's controlling that square, even though she can't move there. So she's defending these 2 pawns that she can't move to. At the very least, 8. All right. The correct answer is these 4, these 3, these 6. Right? She's defending the pawn on g3. right? These three and this one. $17 total. Why is she not controlling e6? Someone wants to know. Why is the queen not controlling e6? Because there's a pawn on d5, right? So she can't see through it. All right. In fact, the pawn on d5, she's threatening, right? She's attacking it now. That's now got 2 attackers on d5 and only 1 defender. So black takes care of the d5 pawn with e6. The first move of the kingside chunk. Yeah, Steve, people do it in different ways. I myself can't picture a single board in my head, but as you've seen, I can play a bunch of games blindfolded at the same time. All right, guys. So in this 2x4 chunk on the king side, what's missing now? What is missing? The e7 pawn. It's the only thing missing in the chunk. Okay. Now, list for me every black piece in the position that's undefended. So just go like square by square. You know, what black pieces are not defended right now? What black pieces are not defended? As somebody mentioned earlier, usually rooks start out undefended. Are they still undefended? At some point, they become defended when the back rank clears up and they start defending each other, or the queen defends them, or somebody castles. But what are black's undefended pieces? Okay, we got the b7 pawn. That's correct. We've got the rooks. And the bishop on g4. Wow, fantastic, Caitlin. You're doing even better than on the first game. And it's getting harder. In a sense, a king is always undefended since you can't trade for him, but yeah. Okay, so in this position, if white's queen wanted to take on b7, would that win a pawn for white? Yeah, white could grab that pawn. White would be up a pawn. Chess Latte normally doesn't like pawns, but it looks like this time Chess Latte is ready to take that pawn. So that's good to see. However, white didn't take the pawn on b7. It would have won a whole pawn, but white did something else. Something even better than queen b7. I will give you guys a minute. Some of you may only need 20 seconds, but I'll give you a minute to try and figure out the next move in the game that white played that was even better than queen takes b7. There was nothing wrong with queen b7, but white has something even stronger here. All right, you guys are asking questions, so now answer your own questions. You're asking yourself, is it this move? Is it that move? Now answer for yourself if you're right or wrong. Colin Smith, the bishop on g2 cannot take on b7 because black still has this d5 square blocked by the pawn chain. Black has an f7, e6, d5 pawn chain here to try and block out the bishop on g2. Excellent, Colin. You're doing great. Yeah, Paul says the e6 pawn has taken away black's option of playing bishop d7. So this bishop's scope is now a little bit reduced by its own pawn chain, right? But black wanted to get out there in advance on purpose, right? I mean, they wanted to be outside before black set up the pawn chain. All right, I think the majority of you have said the right answer in chat by now, and everybody else has read you guys saying the right answer, so we can just move on. Let me just fix the cardboard I'm sitting on here. All right. The answer is queen to a4. Check. And spotting one of those undefended pieces. No, queen b3 was a good move, Steve. Queen b3 was a good move. We'll back up and check that. All right, Steve, so we're going to go back through the game up to queen b3, and we're going to see why queen b3 was correct. c4, c6, g3, d5, c takes d5, c takes d5, bishop g2, bishop g4. Now, here it's white's move, and this is where white played queen b3, attacking two pawns that were both weak, right? If white played queen a4 check here, attacking the king and the bishop, what defense could black play? Or how many defenses are there for black? There would actually be two okay moves for black in that position. Yeah, you guys have mentioned one, or Steve's already mentioned one of them to himself, bishop d7. Daster saw that one too. And there's a second defense for black here. Queen d7. Very good, Daster. So, yeah, so the bishop could be saved either with bishop d7, and then when the queen moves back to b3, black could play bishop c6, defending everything. Or on queen a4 check, black could play queen d7 now, blocking the check and defending the bishop. So that's why white starts with queen b3, attacking two pawns. And only if black defends the d5 pawn with e6, which is the best looking move for black's pawn structure, only after e6 does this bishop get completely blocked out from the d7 square and the queen side, and then queen a4 wins a piece. So e6 is actually a blunder. Black should have just sacked a pawn in that position instead. All right. Another way you guys can do this exercise, by the way, as we're doing this, is instead of looking at my chessboard and the arrows I'm drawing, you can just sit there and close your eyes. Just listen to my weird voice. You know, just close your eyes, sit there in your chair, and just listen to the game. For some people, that's actually much more helpful or easier than looking at a chessboard, because some people get distracted by just random visual stuff around them in the room, right? Like, you know, a blanket, a book, a chair, whatever, right? So for some of you, it may be even easier to just close your eyes and just focus like C4, C6, G3, D5, C takes D5, C takes D5. You can do the same thing that we're doing just like that. That's another option for how to do it. All right. Let's move up to a slightly longer game, okay, folks? Let's do one more longer game. These are also good games to memorize that I'm using, these really short games. You know, like just having a collection of short games that you remember that you can play through in your head can be really nice. And then every now and then just stop and play through it in your head again to see if you still have it, right? So I could just play through, you know, some old game of mine in my head and see if I still remember it. I'm using chunks to get to move 15 faster. Yeah. Nice. All right. Yeah. So, all right. So let's keep going. I just played through an old game of mine. Still remember it. All right. So let's make it a little bit longer here. Game do I want to use? D4. And I want you guys to become self-sufficient. So I'm going to stop asking you questions about what's on H5, what's on A6, where can the bishop C1 move, right? I'm going to stop after every move and give you guys a couple seconds to ask yourselves some questions, okay? It's a new game, 1D4, and I want you guys to now just make some random moves or ask yourself some random questions to check on the position for yourself on each move, right? So on each move, I'll stop for a second. I'll let you ask yourselves questions. You can do it now, right? So you can ask yourself, what about the king side chunk, right? Or you can ask yourself, what's on H5, what's on H6, what's on H7, what's on H8? All right, D4. Knight F6. Knight F3. C5. All right. Charlie's saying 2 defenders on d4, 1 attacker. Nevertheless, the pawn moves forward to d5. And now black plays b5. And I'm going to give you guys a moment here to get oriented to the position. Make sure you've still got it well. Can you guys keep track without me asking questions for you? Okay. Bishop g5. Knight e4. Yeah, knight e4. So what's on g5? Is it attacked? Is it defended? Defended by the knight on f3, exactly. Nevertheless, white's going to save this bishop. All right. Black plays bishop b7. Now, one question for you guys is, can you tell me everything that's on this long diagonal right now? Try that. Go a8, b7, c6. Tell me everything on this diagonal. Did I go a little bit too fast, Marco, or did you not ask, or is it harder without me asking you the questions? I'm really pushing you guys on this one. All right, Erxor says, rook, bishop, nothing. Pawn, knight, knight, pawn, rook. Very good. Marco, do you want to use the move list here to try and reconstruct from move 1 or 2 back up to now? Try and catch up with us again. Steve, you almost got it. There's a white pawn on d5 as well, which maybe you knew. All right. Are you guys okay asking yourselves questions? Or should I resume my string of random quizzes? What's on h4? What's on f8? What's missing from this chunk? Did black move anything out yet? Can you guys do that for yourselves yet? Or should I keep helping you along? Colin Smith is right. The knight is gone from that chunk. It's on e4, a weird dangly square. The bishop's hoping to defend the knight by winning the d5 pawn, but not so easy, Mr. Bambisi. Okay, you guys are doing great. Bishop f4, bishop b7. White plays queen to d3. And Marco says the knight on e4 is not defended. He's correct. The pawn's in the way at the moment. I did this for a long time yesterday, Charlie, during my evening stream. Dastro and Chess Latte say this queen is attacking two different things. What's the queen attacking? E4 knight and B5 pawn. That's right. Now, for those of you who know my chess theory, that a lot of openings involve a fight for like one pair of central squares of the same color. At the start of the game, you're usually fighting for either d5, e4 or d4, e5. After white plays queen d3, and seeing all the moves that have come up to this point, what squares are white and black fighting for in this particular opening? What are the key central squares being fought over here? You guys are right, the b5 and e4 are being attacked. This is a d5, e4 opening, right? So it's like the French defense, the Caro-Kann, the Queen's Gambit declined. If black played knight f6, which they didn't play here, then white could play e2 to e4, thanks to the queen defending e4. Once the e-pawn defends d5, this bishop starts to get blocked out. White seems to be in a very, very good position for winning the fight over e4, d5. They can't take the pawn on b5 necessarily yet because d5 is hanging. They might be able to do it. But I guarantee after knight f6, a grandmaster will play e4 for white and try to win the fight over e4, d5. Okay, yeah, the light squares jewel him, exactly. It's the light squared center pair. Okay. So in this position, black plays f5. Now I'm pushing you guys with a really unusual position that probably at most 1 out of 100 of you play this kind of position or have any experience in it. When I gave you the Petrov trap, I would guess that like 90% or more of you have seen that Queen E2 Petrov trap. When I gave you the Reti opening versus the Slav, it was probably down to 10%. And now it's probably 1% of you play openings like this one. F5, what is black doing to their king and to their king side? Yeah, statistically, it's possible that 0 of you have. I would guess on average like 1% or less of people would have played this opening here. So after f5, which black pieces are undefended in this position and which ones are defended? It's a good question. You can ask yourself your own questions. Lots of pawns hanging out on the 5th rank. That's right. We have how many pawns on the 5th rank? Between white and black pawns, right? Still b5 is undefended. That's right, Daster. And yeah, so if we stop counting the pawns and count undefended things for black, b5 is undefended. You could take it with the queen, yeah, if you want to. What else does black have undefended? Is the a8 rook still undefended? Or the h8 rook? The bishop on b7 is hanging, a couple people say. The rook on h8 is hanging. The rook on a8 is not hanging because there's a bishop here now. So these are hanging pieces for black. Anything else undefended for black on the board anywhere? Anything else undefended? Yeah, Marco, queen b5 looks dubious because of bishop takes d5. That's a very, very good point. Pawn f5 from Urxor is correct. Julium, your pawn on c5 is defended. Who's defending your pawn on c5? That's right, Caitlin, the knight. Bishalani. There's a knight on e4 defending the pawn on c5. Okay, so these are black's hanging pieces. Pawn f5, pawn b5, bishop b7, rook h8. As somebody was just mentioning, a very important question is, can queen takes b5 just take this pawn and hit the bishop? Black would play bishop takes d5. Who seems to be winning the fight for the key central squares after bishop takes d5 from black? I know f5 looks weird and ugly to you guys, but you need to understand the move f5 as being a move to fight for this pair of e4, d5 squares. And that fight can sometimes be important enough to justify some slightly weird squares. Marco, amazingly, has this position at move 6 in a completely weird opening he's never seen before, played before, heard of. Probably black gets a good position if white now spends time with the queen trading the b5 pawn for the d5 pawn, because black ends up with great control over e4 and d5. Yeah. By the way, if white played queen b5, bishop d5, what's the balance of attackers and defenders on the knight b8? How many white attackers, how many black defenders? The correct answer is from Kamedelsek and Urxor. There's 2 attackers and 2 defenders on that knight on b8, yeah? The black rook and queen, like Marco says, yeah? And what are the 2 white pieces attacking it? Queen plus bishop f4. So, folks, we've been working on this for maybe an hour at this point, right? We've put in a good hour's hard work. If there are any players, let's say under 1,200 in the chat who want to answer this question, do you now believe that even though you're a beginner, you could learn to go through entire games in your head, or you could learn to play a game blindfolded yourself? Do you guys believe you could do it? This is 1 hour of work. You've gotten to where you are right now. Is it going to hurt your heads? I think you've found the answer to that already. It hurts your heads a little bit, right? But it's like that question about resistance yesterday, right? You feel like things are fuzzy. You feel like you don't really know what's there. Your brain is asking you to give up. You encounter some difficulties and your brain says, oh, it's too much. Please just give up. Let's do something else. But if you push past that feeling of not being able to do it, I don't know. It seems like you guys can do it. To me, it seems possible. Steve loses track of the little pawns. They're pesky, yeah. All right. I'm going to make it even harder for you guys for a second, okay? I'm just going to push you in a few different directions. If some of the stuff I make you do today you can't do, do not let that discourage you, okay? I just encouraged you for a second there. Now I'm going to discourage you a little bit, but don't get discouraged, okay? What I'm teaching you are things that you can come back and try again on your own, okay? You can keep pushing through all of this stuff if you want to, okay? So you guys, you see this position here with queen d3, pawns like this, knight on e4, knight f3, bishop f4 for white, black knight on e4, black bishop on b7 looking through the white d5 pawn at his knight on e4, black f5 pawn anchoring it for the moment. See this position here? Let's take a break from this for 1 minute and then come back to it and see if you still remember this position. Yeah, I sometimes have to do that too, TBA. Probably to a different extent than you. Everybody has different limitations, but everybody also has different capabilities. So you've got other things that are strengths and ways of coping with things, and you can find ways to do the same thing other people do in a different way. I can't picture anything in my head, TBA, nothing. So I can't even see a chessboard. If I close my eyes, I don't know what I look like. I don't know what my partner looks like because she's not in the room right now. I don't know what my kids look like or what my parents look like. I can't picture the front door of my house or the steps to get to the house. I don't know how many steps there are at the front of the house. I don't know if it's 3 or 5 or 6. Okay? I can't see anything. Nothing. But I can play easily 7 games at once blindfolded. And I've nowhere near hit my limit. I can easily do more than that. So you can find a way to do this too. All right. So everybody here, you've sort of got this position. You're ready for a 1 minute distraction. Then we're going to come back to this. Yeah, Foos, the thing is white's had a knight on f3 for a long time. As soon as black plays f5, you're like, I'd like to play f3, but I've got a knight on f3, right? It's a knight here anchored like this. You've got a knight here and you want to play f3. Yeah. All right, you guys got this position. We're going to leave it behind for a second. We're going to come back, okay? So here we go. We're going to play through the Petrov trap game completely blindfolded in our own heads and then come back to this, okay? So you can close your eyes if you want. You can focus as hard. You can crispe yourself if you want and like just focus as intently as possible. Or you can be as relaxed as possible. Whatever works for you. Petrov trap. E4. E5. Play this whole game out blindfolded. See if you remember it from before. Knight f3. Knight f6. Knight takes e5. Knight takes e4. Queen e2. Knight f6. Knight c6 check. Hitting the queen with the knight. If she blocks on e7, the knight can still take her. Black resigned there. All right, back to our weird opening game. Black's just played f5, and white, showing Foos's great insight into chess, plays knight f3 to d2 in this position. What instincts Foos has? Foos is not the only person who wants to get rid of that knight on e4 and be able to play f3. So knight fd2, you guys remember our position at all? You know, knight bd2 could have been played. But white plays knight f to d2. fighting for e4 and d5. White knows what's up. They want to play f3 and e4. They're trying to challenge this knight. If you win control of e4 and black trades on d2, it actually won't matter if you played knight b to d2 or knight f to d2 first once you recapture with the other knight, right? It won't actually matter which knight went to d2 first. All you remember, JB, is there's pawns galore on the 5th rank. All right. Anybody want to tell JB what is on the 5th rank, in what order? Anyone want to read us the 5th rank of this game after my little distraction? All right, Caitlin reads us. Nothing, black pawn, white pawn, nothing, black pawn, and then nothing else. That's correct. This is the last black pawn, and then it's nothing. Chess Latte says nothing, pawn, nothing, nothing. Correct. Dastro says nothing, black pawn, white pawn, nothing, black pawn, nothing. Correct as well. Julim's got it right as well. Marco's got it. Colin, nothing, pawn, nothing. Perfect. Perfect, everybody. Perfection. All right, so that's what we've got on the 5th rank. On the 4th rank, we've got a knight on e4 and a bishop for white. This knight here defended like this. This is a white bishop. Queen here, bishop here. All right. Black said, you know what? If I trade on d2, I'm bringing out this piece. There's no way I'm bringing out your pieces. I rather retreat if that's the option. And black plays knight f6. Appropriately, folks, this game that I'm showing you right now was played by the Blindfold King. Does anybody know who I mean when I say the Blindfold King? The world record holder for the biggest blindfold simultaneous exhibition. Timur, Julim, that's right, Timur. Chess Latte, you're guessing white's next move correctly. Timur Gareev played this as black. Perfect for our blindfold exercise, right, folks? You're following in the footsteps of Timur Gareev in 2 different ways at once right now. Morphe was pretty good at blindfold chess, TBA, that's for sure. Timur's probably better than him at it. That's okay, Marco Batman. I can tell you, if you're interested in learning some of the characters of the chess world, Timur Gareev is an Uzbeki grandmaster who now lives in the U.S., travels the world a lot, but spent a lot of time in the U.S. lately. He plays for the U.S. flag now instead of the Uzbeki flag. He is rated just about 2,600 FIDE. So he's about, maybe around top 200 in the world. And he played some huge number of games blindfolded. Let's see if Wikipedia has the number. "48 boards in Las Vegas. 48 games blindfolded. Apparently, he's also a skydiver who has jumped off 150 planes by himself. Probably while playing chess in his head. So, yeah. All right, so Gareev played knight f6 here. And as some people were guessing, white played queen takes f5. You guys want to remember to ask yourself some questions now, right? Where are the pieces? What's going on? What is going on? Queen on f5. Black's down a pawn, yeah. Knight on f6 for black, queen on f5 for white, yeah. There's a knight on d2 for white, blocking in the knight on b1 a little bit, but not blocking in this bishop because this bishop's already came out here. Now the f-file is stacked. It used to be the long diagonal. We've got bishop, pawn, nothing. Bishop, queen, knight, nothing, bishop. Right? And remember, I can't picture any of that. But once we ask ourselves something, I can tell you where everything is. And you can too. Right? If we ask what's on the f-file, you guys can also go, bishop hasn't moved yet. Pawn hasn't moved yet. Knight went to d2 recently. Nothing here. Bishop was last seen on f4. Queen just took a pawn on f5. Knight came back to f6. That's how the queen got here. And the f7 pawn went to f5. That's where it got captured. So there's nothing. And this bishop is still trapped on f8 because neither of these pawns has moved. You guys can all do that. D5 is defended once by the queen. Very good. And it's attacked by the knight and the bishop. The black queen is not attacking it because black hasn't moved the d pawn yet. So a non-Queen's Gambit opening. This is a sort of Benoni-Benko type of opening where black played knight f6 and c5 and then started fighting against white's d5 and e4 squares. So anybody think black will take the pawn on d5 here? After queen takes f5 from white. What do you guys think? Is this pawn appetizing for black right now? For their bishop and knight. I don't know, Marco. It's either a Benoni or a Benko, depending on your taste. Has white's f1 bishop yet moved this game? Dastro wants to know. Or another way of asking you that is, what is going on with the kingside chunk from white? White's playing a queen's pawn opening, right? Where they sometimes don't move a lot of kingside pieces. What has white moved from this chunk so far? What has white moved from the chunk? Only the knight, as Julim says. That's the only thing missing. Otherwise, we've got a chunk. This knight went to f3 and then d2 to fight for e4. So this whole chunk is intact. Black's going to take the pawn on d5, I think, with the knight. Let's type it to the move list. For those who like the move list, knight takes d5. Urxor, white's bishop is on what square? White's light squared bishop is on what square? White's light squared bishop is threatening nothing, right? Zero things. It's still blocked in by pawns on e2 and g2. Yeah, no problem. And you're not dumb. You're just doing something that's difficult for you. That's a big difference. In fact, it would be dumb to never do anything difficult for yourself, I think. So actually, we could call you smart. Or at least we could say that at the moment, you're making a smart decision. We're not supposed to tell students that they are just smart or something like that. That supposedly doesn't breed motivation, you know, if they think that they're intrinsically one thing or another, right? So at the moment, you're making a smart decision. Okay, Chess Latte is expecting white to play the move e4 now, letting this bishop out and going for bishop takes b5. Good eyes, Chess Latte. It feels to me like you really see this position. You see the hidden attack of your bishop on b5 with the pawn blocking it. You know you want to take space in the center. Okay, but before we do that, white decided that they didn't want to lose a tempo on knight takes f4. e4, knight f4, right? They would have to spend a move recapturing with the queen. So white plays a slightly weird move, but it's motivated by tempi in a sense. Well, I don't know about this move. Bishop takes b8. It feels dubious to me. I basically never play these kind of moves where I trade off undeveloped pieces. It feels like a bad move to me. I don't know. I haven't studied this game. I just picked it for today's exercise. I don't really know anything about it. But I have played this kind of opening before, so I have some feeling for it, which is very rare. Bishop takes b8. Is there anything stopping white from playing like queen h5 or queen g6 checkmate to this king right now? That's what white's going for exactly, Chess Latte. Black's got the h and g pawns, right? So they're just barely not checkmated. This pawn here is stopping queen g6 mate. And on queen h5 check, you can play g6 with the g pawn defended by the h7 pawn. So we don't have checkmate yet. So bishop takes b8 is played by white. Bishop takes b8 is played by white. And black plays queen takes b8. Okay, now take some time to ask yourself some questions and see if you still know where the position is. We're about to hit 10 moves in one of the weirdest games you've seen in your lives. So see if you can figure out where things are. You can ask yourself about the kingside chunks, or you can go square by square and ask yourself, you know, what's here, what's here, what's here, what's here, what's here, what's here. This is the last move, queen takes b8. And I'm going to give you guys a moment. To try and ask yourselves some questions and firm up this position in your own minds. White's queen is the only piece in the black territory. Great. Just asking yourself who's crossed to the other side. In fact, it's white's only piece that's past the second rank right now, isn't it, Marco? White only has one piece that's past the second rank at the moment. This pawn got captured. This knight retreated. This bishop traded. White's got one piece. Third and fourth ranks are actually like completely empty for both players. Crazy stuff. Oh man, Marco, you've been playing for a month and you're really getting into this. Black has one active piece. You think? I think at the moment black has a couple slightly better placed pieces than white. The queen on b8 is not terrible because it's on a diagonal. Knight on d5 could be good. And bishop on b7. Black has a lot of active pieces, you actually feel like. Okay, yeah. All right. I think around here it might be worth saying what to do if your brain has just exploded and you can't go any further. Because I'm guessing by now we've hit a few people who are just like, oh my God, that's as much as I can do in one day. You've pushed through resistance like 4 or 5 times already today, and you're exhausted. That is fine. That is great. Take a break. Do something else. That was a pretty long stretch of concentration. Take a break. Go do something else. And then at some point later today, see if you can play through our short first 2 games in your head again by yourself. There was the Queen E2 Petrov trap, and there was the C4, C6, G3, D5, C takes D game, where eventually Queen A4 check wins a bishop, right? Okay, so take those 2 games that you successfully played through earlier today and try going through them again in your own head sometime, late today if it's still the daytime, or tomorrow if it's already nighttime. Okay, so just practice going through those games that you already learned. And good work. And remember that you can learn to play blindfold, and you can just push through 1 extra move in the future. If you got through 8 moves of this weird Gareev game today, another day you can get through 9 moves of it or 10 moves of it. You can always come back to the VOD that will be of this show right now in a couple days, and try and follow me like 1 or 2 moves further than you did today. All right, and for those of you who want to push on, we will push on. So bishop b8, queen b8. White now plays their dream move, e4, kicking this knight. And the status on this c5 and b5 pawns, are either of them defended? Are either of them attacked? That's right, Charlie, because it'll help you to basically calculate a 3 or 4 move variation ahead, and then actually see the position clearly after the 3 to 4 move variation. C might be like visual or not visual, right? But to sort of like understand and know what that position is 3 or 4 moves down the road. And then you can use that to play better, right? Because you actually know what your variations are producing on the board in advance. Helps you pick which one you want to play. And as far as just playing blindfold chess, you guys can always start. You're already all good enough to start. And if you don't finish a game, that's fine. You just play the game till move whatever. The first time you get lost, fuzzy, or confused, just start asking yourself where things are, right? Like, what's on A5? Nothing. What's on B5? A hanging pawn. What's on C5? An undefended pawn. What's on D5? A knight attacked by a pawn. What's on E5? Nothing. What's on F5? A queen. What's on G5? Nothing. What's on H5? Nothing. The first time you get stuck or fuzzy or start feeling like giving up, the first time you should always try and push through. Ask yourself some questions, see if you can put the board back together for yourself. But there's no harm in at some point saying like, okay, I lost it. And then you'll just try again another day. Yeah, you can practice blindfold online for sure. Okay, bishop b8, queen b8. Oh, sorry, I didn't write down the next move. White plays e4. I asked you guys about the status of these pawns. Hopefully you see that they're in some danger, for those of you who are still with us. Bishop is threatening b5. Queen is looking through the knight at both of those squares. And neither of them is defended at the moment. So e4 hitting the knight, but black plays e6, attacking the queen. Look, e4, e6. They just decided to play the French suddenly. In the middle of all this madness. All right, queen's attacked. And she's in a weird place. She goes queen h5 check. Ask yourselves 2 questions and then we'll move on. I'm doing the same thing. I'm just looking around this board, you know, just asking myself where different pieces are, what they're doing. Just asking myself what square the queen wants to end up on, right? Where does she want to go? You come up with questions. Why so easy? You ask yourself questions. You can ask yourself what's on g5, or you can ask yourself where's the white queen want to be, or you can ask yourself, you know, what undefended pieces are on the board, stuff like that. I'm not going to the moon, TBA. I'm super happy on the Earth. Are you going to the moon? Black will play g6. That's right, Chess Latte. Can white play queen e5, attacking this rook? What do you guys think? Is that a good square in the center of the board for this queen? Queen e5. g6 was just played. What do you guys think of queen e5? Erxor is right. There's a black queen on b8. So we're sort of not allowed to go queen e5. The e6 pawn was defended by the d7 pawn. Black's pawn structure now looks like this. That's the black pawn structure. The white pawn structure is like this. Much more traditional. If you only looked at the white pieces, it would look like a pretty normal game. All right, so g6, the queen just heads back home to e2. And when she does so, which white piece does she sort of tick off? Which white piece gives her a dirty look or a passive-aggressive comment? Good night, Charlie. Be well. See you tomorrow. That bishop is very annoyed, right? The bishop on f1 is like, we finally played e4, and you're just going to come sit down like in my face? Right? Can you imagine she's got her back to him, but she's like an inch away, like in his like space? He's like, that is so weird that someone just came and stood right in front of me without saying hi or anything, or excuse me, or checking my personal space. What is up with this queen? So she goes to e2. Yeah. So now white's position. White's position is easier than black's, I think. There are knights here and here, queen and bishop, rooks on their starting squares, king here, and then the pawn structure that we mentioned, right? Doomp, doomp, doomp. That's white. That's what white's got. What black has is a knight on d5 that still has to move. It's been hanging to this pawn for a while. I would expect it to move. Knight b4. Threatening anything? That's right. Why so easy? Threatening knight c2. So this knight gets out of the way so the queen can defend it. Knight f3. Right, if queen b5, there would have been knight c2. So white plays knight f3, defending it. Bishop g2 is not a threat because white's got a pawn on e4, defended by the queen. Queen b5 is not checked. Black still has their d7 pawn. Very important. Yeah, still has this d7 pawn kind of anchoring this pawn structure here. Black's got a very weird position and white's got a very normal position. Strange contrast. No, you guys are doing great at this. You're all doing really great. You guys are doing absolutely great. Black plays c4. Okay, Marco. You did really well. All right, D. Grabsky. I can tell you guys where all the pieces are for a second if anyone wants to get a quick refresh here. Black plays c4, I think, so white can't play c3 because of knight d3 check. And black's hoping to maybe put the bishop on the long diagonal, so that's why they doubly don't want c3. a3 doesn't bother them as much, disrupting the knight. They don't want c3 blocking the bishop as well. So black plays c4 here. So here's the black pawn structure. Okay. There's the black pawn structure. It's awkward. Black's got rooks on the starting squares, king and bishop on the starting square. Then the pieces black's moved is there's a bishop on b7, queen on b8, knight on b4. That's black. Now white's pawn structure is still like this. Rooks are on the starting squares, bishop and king are on the starting square, knight on the starting square, queen here, and this knight just came to f3. If you take white's position as a chunk or as a couple chunks, white's position is not so hard to keep track of here, right? Like you've got the queen is blocking the bishop. Other than that, this is your e-pawn, your knight from g1. All this is pretty normal at the moment, right? White's traded the dark squared bishop. And black's dark squared bishop should become amazing at some point because black's got this light square pawn structure. Right now, there's almost no pawns on the board blocking dark squares. This one here just moved to c4. So there's almost no pawns on dark squares on the entire board. Like almost nothing blocking this guy. He's an extremely powerful unopposed bishop. Black's got a real weird position for it. White's just setting up for the next game. Next, this knight will come to g1 and queen d1. So after c4, white plays knight c3. Hey, Tebow. Anybody want to tell me what the knight on c3 is attacking or defending? That's great, Tebow. Me too sometime, very often. Like last night, I was like so tired. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do like another stream? I'm just getting like run down. And then I came on and it was just awesome. We like worked so hard on endgames. And I thought I was too tired to really work myself. But we worked hard. It was awesome. And it was a real big like lift me up. Like I was less tired after working hard than before working hard. It's the pawn on b5, Chess Latte. That's right. It's the pawn on b5. So black moves their last pawn to a light square here, a6, defending their pawn structure. Is there anybody in chat who can tell me the entire black pawn structure right now? The entire light square pawn structure of black. Yeah, there's an e4 pawn. Why so easy? Yeah. There's no way it's above your level if you're 2100 DZ Verb. We've got players rated 800 who are still following this game blindfolded. And it's their first time trying in their entire lives. A6, B5, C4 is correct. D7, E6, G6, H7 is correct. And you guys are amazing. Chess Latte, the C pawn recently moved to C4. Oh, you meant C4. Perfect. Why so easy? D7, E6, G6, H7. That's right. The perfect all light square pawns. So this bishop here is as happy as a bishop can be. All right. It's time to level it up, DZ. All right. So after A6, white goes to crack black on the king side. And I know some of you are thinking white should play A3 and chase that knight. It's a possible move. I would not say that's a bad choice. But white here goes for H4 to try and go crack this, develop the rook, and try and create some light square weaknesses for black. Because black has the extra dark square bishop. That means they've got a little bit less light square control. They're trying to make up for it with a very light square pawn structure. H4 looks reasonably strong as well. Where's black's king going? Good question. I think black's king never moves this game. He just chills on E8 all game while, pawns get pushed on the queen side and king side and pieces float around randomly. So right now you guys all know where this king is. White's coming in, H4. You guys can probably predict white's next move. This has become very popular in chess to throw H pawns at G6 pawns. It's always been sort of popular, but now it's become like, I don't know, Facebook popular. So black develops the very nice bishop to G7. He better shine because the game was set up for him. This was all a setup. It's like all they did was like run plays for him. Black now has 2 fianchettoed bishops. Yes. Cheesy, you may remember my theory that if the center is really locked up, it's not very good for fianchettoed bishops. And if the center is very open, then fianchettoed bishops are the best. How would you evaluate the quality of black's fianchettoed bishops right now? Huh, Cheesy? The moves are here on the side, Chaim, if you want to try and catch up with us. Glad to see that COVID hasn't taken you down yet. On this black bishop's diagonal, is there just a rook and a pawn and nothing else blocking him? Yup. I think so. White's e-pawn is on e4. That's not blocking him. Pawn on c4, knight on b4. There's just air here from c3 to f6. Very good, Caitlin. Very good question. Oh, knight c3 was played. Look at that, guys. I lost track of one for a second as well, and you guys were on top of it. Knight c3. Beautiful. Knight c3, so there's no immediate threat here. Move 16, a surprise to nobody. White plays h5, increasing the scope of the rook, getting in touch with g6. White wants g6 to become a weakness. Hey, Deva. Welcome to our chess stream. I'm sure that random people who clicked on our stream for the first time today and just like saw like an empty board are mostly just like, huh, what? Okay, I'm out. I don't think we're going to get any new followers today. But that's all right. That's not the goal of this stream. It's definitely not the goal of the stream. All right. Neither player is castled. That's right, Cheesy. And I believe neither player does castle this game, period. Yeah, there's some odd things about this game. There's a few. No new followers, but some renewed subs. Actually, Diva, we've got lots of 800s following this game. We've got lots of 800s doing it. Yeah, it's not necessarily like a strong, weak thing. It's just you know, the inner strength of being willing to try stuff that seems tough. That's all. That's the only criteria. And then, of course, for something like this, it's really hard to come in the middle of it versus at the beginning, because we started with baby steps. You know, we started with learning 4-move games. And now we're looking at a 20-move Grandmaster game. So it's a whole new level, right? We start with like a basic opening trap, and now we're doing some serious heavy lifting. This game here is actually played by Timur Gareev, who famously has played the most blindfold games simultaneously of anybody. Okay. So we're getting near the end of this game, folks. So if you guys made it to here, don't give up at this point. H5 comes in from white. Here's black's pawn structure for anybody forgetting it. Right? Here's white's pawn structure. Right? White's got knights on the standard squares, a queen on e2, and a really, really annoyed bishop on f1. Just like, come on, guys. Are you trying to lose the game? Are you trying to lose the game? You realize that if I'm on f1 at the end of the game, it's not going to be a game we won. Black's got the bishop on g7, rook on h8, with this pawn in touch with everything. Beautiful bishops they have been approved of. This double fianchettoed bishops. Knight on b4, king on e8, queen on b8. Here it makes sense to get this queen into the game. I would go to e5, but the knight would take me. So Timur played queen c7. I'll always play bishop f1, but that doesn't mean leave the bishop on f1 from the start. Yeah. Very nice, TVA. So queen c7 is played by black. And now there's going to be a couple trades. We'll see if this helps or hurts your guys' view of the position. But white is going to take on g6, and black's going to take back. Then they're going to trade rooks. So this is move 17. H takes G, A takes G, H takes G. Now, let's talk about this square here. What's on H8 right now? What piece is on H8? A rook. Okay. Is anybody attacking that rook? Is anybody defending that rook? A rook is attacking it. A bishop is defending it. Guys, I don't mean to insult you by being surprised. Obviously, I'm having you guys do this because I think you can do it, but you know, I had high expectations, and we're exceeding my expectations. So, for whatever that means, that's how it is. Rook takes h8 was played here. Is that check or not? Should I put a little plus in my notation on rook takes h8? The purpose of queen c7, Urksor, just improving the queen from b8. Now she could go to c5. Now the rook could be moved out of a8, or black could castle queenside, depending. It is checked. The knight and bishop have both moved. All right, so black's going to recapture. We're going to put in a little check here. And we're going to play bishop takes h8. Can we see the 8 in the notation? Not quite. So how about this g6 pawn, folks? How's it looking? Anybody near it? Anybody next to it? Is it defended? Is it attacked? What's going on with g6? Yeah, the first couple moves are going to be cut off. I've got just enough room to write in the last moves here now. The g6 pawn is isolated now, right? h7's been traded. It's neither defended nor attacked. Yeah, it's got just nothing here. That's the weakness white was going for with h4, h5. And all the bishop f1 is still blocked in by the pawn and the queen. At least it's not blocking in a rook on h1 anymore. White got to offload that. So that seems like fair. Good play by white. White goes after g6. You know white's wanted g6 this whole time, right, guys? Knight h4. I'm sorry your job's not as awesome as this, Steve, but or not as cool as this. But I hope it's got its good points too. All right, this g6 square, let me ask you guys a deep strategic question. I'm just hitting you with everything today. Does this g6 pawn seem like it might be in danger, tough to defend? Does black have problems if they wanted to just passively start defending it? Or is it no big deal? You can just defend it and wise the knight on h4. Dang, look at you guys. Yeah, it's isolated. It's on a light square. Black's got very few pieces on the king side, right? Just a bishop on h8 and a king here. White could potentially play queen g4. Like, if on knight h4, if black tried to defend with that king all by itself, white could maybe play queen g4, leave c2 hanging, but just go after the black king. And on knight h4, if white played g5, if black played g5, white could maybe play queen h5 check, followed by taking this bishop or taking this pawn with check or something. So this g6 pawn is a danger or a problem here for black. Difficult to defend, Colin says, but may have to stay there because of queen h5. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so black doesn't defend it. Black now goes for a counterattack. Sorry, it's not on g7. I need to reach all the way back to h8 for this piece. Bishop takes knight on c3. Our king is still on e8, Steve. Absolutely right. We go bishop takes knight on c3. Was anybody defending this knight? What does white do? They're in check, by the way. I gave you guys that much. b2's got to do it. Nobody else is going to do it, so b2's got to take it. B takes c3. Now, what piece is on c4, if any? Very good. Why so easy? We got a pawn on c4. We got a black knight now attacked on b4. Perfect. Can black play knight c2 check here, or is it defended? If we want to like hit the king and the rook here. Why so easy? Suggests queen takes c2 would be a good defense from white, right? It's pretty defended. Julian agrees. You guys are all agreeing. Good Lord, how are you guys doing this? Okay. Ready? She's going to come in now. Queen e5. You could say, why even go from b8? But remember I said we wanted to go to e5, and you guys said the knight would take me if I put my queen in the center of the board? Remember that when I wanted to get onto the dark squares with my bishop and I wanted to centralize? And we said knight on f3 would take me? Do you guys know where that knight is now? It went to h4, right? It tried to punish my g6 pawn, or it tried to punish Garayev's g6 pawn. So now Garayev plays queen e5, which does not defend g6 at all. This is a pure counterattack, right? He's attacking something, though. What is the queen on e5 threatening? What are its tactical connections? Pawn on e4 is now barely defended. It's attacked twice and defended once. Right? If white takes my knight on b4, queen takes rook check. Which is not very good for white. And yes, as Julian says, there's another direct threat of queen takes c3 check. Exactly right. All right. So in this position, white needs to defend c3, basically. They can't take the knight and allow queen a1, right? They need to defend this square, but they've got the bishop f1 and knight on h4, which can't really do anything. So it's the queen and king that have to defend themselves suddenly. If the queen goes to e3, there's knight c2. If the queen goes to d2, there's queen takes e4, check, picking up the knight on h4 at least. Right? But also the queen comes in touch with c2, and black could play knight c2 check, possibly next. So white uses the king to defend both of these squares. King d2 is the move to defend those two weak pawns. So why can't black take on c3 now? Because the king is defending it. Yeah. The king just came up here. It's defending knight c2 and it's defending queen c3. But here Gray played one more brilliant move and white resigned. I'm not going to ask you to find this brilliant move. It's too hard. I'm going to play the move for you. And then you guys are going to try and picture the final position of the game and figure out why white resigned. Okay? The last move of the game is bishop takes e4. And if you guys can see that position, you have just followed a 20-plus move Grandmaster game blindfolded, along with understanding all kinds of intricate things about what the battle was about and what the two players were playing for and some of the variations behind it. We're not going to have time to read a chess book together today, but essentially what I've just given you could have been like, 2 to 3 pages in a chess book. Why so easy? Earning some applause. A Hollywood handshake. And now the big question, why is this move winning? We took a pawn, but there's just absolute chaos on the board. Here, white resigned. So, what's going on? What's going on? Black is threatening to take on c2, yeah. I think a big question is what's going on with the knight on b4, right? So let's say white took the knight now. What would black play? That's the first big question, right? Queen takes rook would now lose, I think. Queen takes rook would probably lose now because of what move for white? So in our final position, we play pawn takes knight, queen takes rook. White's got the king here and the queen here. What does white play? Queen takes e4. That actually leaves black completely crushed, right? Because we just lost a knight and a bishop for the rook. And when the queen comes to e4, g6 is hanging, rook on a8 is hanging, and black just doesn't have any pieces left that are doing anything, right? They're just out of pieces. What pieces does black have left? All they have is the queen and the rook, which are not working together. They've got nothing. So as a couple of you said, if white plays pawn takes knight here, black has the move queen d4 check. King on d2 can't move anywhere. You can't block because there's a pawn on c4. And if the king goes to the first rank, then you can take the rook with check and continue mopping up from there. then you'll be able to win that endgame with your extra rook. Right? So that's the first thing. We've got our queen here, bishop here, knight here. White can't take the knight because of queen d4. Beautiful. Which means we're really threatening to come into c2 soon, right? There's a secondary threat from black to put the knight on d5, by the way, and just attack c3 more times than white can defend it. The black king is still on e8, never moved, right? And the white king just played its first move to d2 and then resigned. Other question. Can black move the bishop right now, or would white be able to take the queen on e5 in response? It's white's move, but just to check on you guys seeing the position. Can black move the bishop right now? So there's nothing defending this queen. White could take it, right? Black's pawn structure is like this right now. And this bishop traded on c3 to mess up white's queen side. Caitlin was wondering if the black bishop is defending the queen, right? And that's a classic thing to get confused on when we look a million moves ahead while calculating during a game, is you use a piece twice, right? Like you play bishop takes c3 check in a variation, and then like 2 or 3 moves later, you try and like use your bishop anyway and like think your queen's defended or something like that, right? That's very, very classic kind of confusion to have if you're calculating moves during a game for yourself, right? Yeah, so basically this bishop is currently pinned to the queen between queens. So what would black do if white played knight g6 attacking the queen, right? Knight takes g6. That was white's plan. Attacks this. And what would black play there? Black's got a couple moves that look good. Queen g5, queen d5, and queen d6. One of these should come out well for black. The calculation is longer than I'm going to make you guys do. But you can see that black has at least one move that's going to lead to a good position for them, right? They're going to be able to take the knight on g6 after any of those queen checks. Then white can take on b4, and things are complicated, but winning for black. So I'm not gonna make you guys go further than that, right? For example, if you chose the option of queen d6 check, then your queen's defending b4. So then when you take the knight, if white takes here at the end, you go queen b4, and white's position's just a rag, right? Anyway, just one example. You also have the option of playing something like queen d5 check, and then when the king moves, you play knight takes c2, leaving the knight on g6 for a bit, and knight c2 hits their queen and their rook. We're not going to try and calculate like super, super long stuff, right? But that should give you a sense of the balance in this position at the end. So after, oh right, the queen's on e2, sorry. But anyway, you have an option to just take on c2, hitting the rook, and leave the knight hanging on g6 once your queen got out of the way with check. Yes, Flying Puppy Dog, I received your message. I'm just overwhelmed with messages, so sometimes I'm very slow. So, folks, that's basically the end of the game right there. You know, black played bishop e4, and white gave up at this point. Their knight can't really take on g6. Their bishop can't get out. They're faced with knight c2. If they played rook c1, there would be knight takes a2, threatening queen c3 and the rook, and white just resigned here. Okay. So, yeah. Now I'm going to play through the game once for you guys with pieces. A little bit of payoff for everybody who worked through it this hard. I don't think you guys need it, but we're going to do it anyway. And now you guys, now you get to relax, right? After like 2 hours of anguish and stress. And me personally, I love that feeling of being exhausted. I hope you guys mostly feel great right now as well. But whether it's mental or physical, when I push past like those resistance points and then achieve this like incredible state of exhaustion, it's just absolutely one of the most wonderful things there is. All right. So now we play bishop b7. Remember, this opening was this fight over d5 and e4. And queen d3, wanting the knight to retreat and play e4. And black plays this move, which is very weird to a lot of you guys, but is at least you can see is linked to this fight over these squares. White plays knight d2, trying to trade this knight, and as Foos realized, with the idea of maybe f3, e4 as needed. Indeed, Cheesy, I can. No problem. Black retreats the knight. White grabs this pawn, and black gets this one. White plays this move bishop b8, which David no like, but, you know, who knows? Maybe it's a good move. But that's the move I don't like. Out of all White's moves this game, that one really stands out to me. Timur Gareev is a weirdo. You're right. Why so easy? e4. e6. Why queen took over rook? I don't know, to get into this diagonal and potentially to preserve the possibility of castling queenside. I think the queen had legitimate chances of using these diagonals. It also stopped the white queen from going to e5. So if the black rook were on b8, in this position here that's about to come up, this move queen h5, queen h5 to e5 would completely be annoying for black if there were a rook on b8 instead of a queen. Right? Queen e5 would just totally mess up the coordination of this rook and bishop. So g6 was played. This queen came back. Knight b4, threatening mate. Knight, not mate, threatening, you know, something that white can't allow. Knight f3, which defends c2 and keeps this queen out of e5. Black now played c4. Knight c3, hitting this. a6. White tries to develop the rook that's stuck in like this. You know, a big question as far as like better resistance for white this game would have definitely been a3 at some point, right? Playing this position. h4, bishop g7, h5. Black plays this calm little queen c7 move. Trade, 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 trade. White goes after g6. And once white goes after g6, black swoops in with one of the fastest counterattacks you guys have ever seen, right? I mean, we're just sort of sitting here with great pieces, and then look how fast this happens. A trade of your best piece into a centralization, hitting the remaining dark square for white. White can't cope. King here, bishop e4. This is where white resigned. Right? Black's got knight c2 threatened, knight d5 threatened, queen f4 threatened, queen g5 threatened. And that was the end of that. I can explain that in a second, Cheesy. I'm going to let everybody bask in the final position for a moment and sort of compare this position with what they were seeing in their heads when we looked at this before. All right. So there you have it. That was the end of white. Why black played queen c7 in this position? It's just a small improvement of the queen. It introduces the possibility of castling queenside. Black didn't have anything else that they needed to do urgently to improve their position, right? All these pieces are on great squares. It's just the queen that should be improved, even if it's just a small step. Here, maybe next move here. Maybe castle queenside. In the final position, what if rook to e1 is played? Fair question. Ooh, rated by a legend. Folks, if you haven't heard it from me before, I do recommend Gada's stream. So, if you guys haven't already heard that from me and haven't already followed him in the past, I recommend his stream quite highly. A legendary player, fantastic, fantastic player. You would be well off hearing anything he has to say about chess. And Gada, I'm honored, just honored. Thank you very much for the raid. I feel like embarrassed to even have a player as great as you look in our direction. You had a Najdorf thematic. Nice, chess lover. I love the Najdorf too. Anyway, chess lover, you can always try and play through these games blindfolded on your own later, like we did. Let's answer one question here about why rook e1 wasn't played at this point in this game. So let's see. It's a good question. I didn't think of that question blindfolded. If queen g5, white's going to try queen e3. So candidate moves knight d5, knight a2, queen to one of these squares. Sorry, that's just the mouse. What's mate? Queen c3? No. Queen g5, king d1, queen g5, queen e3. Well, there's many options. Some of them are really long to calculate. I mean, a simpler option is something like here, 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 here. Maybe you could take, but look at how simple this particular option is here, right? We're up a pawn and the opponent has like 3 slaughtered pawns in their pawn structure. You can probably even take on a2. You're welcome, Colin. Good work by you. I'm very, very impressed. Other options, we can go check on this square here, king here, take here, here, and then play knight c3 defending the bishop. This one is really, really complicated. Yeah, the king takes. And got like here, 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 here. An option like this is hard. It was hard for me to calculate this all the way out from the starting position, how this might go. But it's very complicated. You know, hard to say what would happen. Hard to believe this. It says Twinkle Toes for who? This is just a mess. I don't know who you would believe or not believe it for. But this position is an absolute mess. So, yeah, maybe there's a chance. I mean, there's a chance for both players. Hard to say. It is hard to imagine resigning with rook to e1 possible here, right? That is hard to understand. Neither of them was playing blindfolded. This is a real tournament game, Marco. This is a real tournament game that I'm just using for our training today. But this is just, you know, from a real GM tournament. Let me try one other thing. Here, here, take this, hitting the rook. Queen takes, knight takes. If the queen trades, my knight can get out at d3 eventually. And if the queen takes, I can come here a second time and take this. Okay, so queen d5, king here, knight c2. Let's consider this option for a second. Does white have any important move here other than like queen takes bishop, maybe rook d1, but then queen g5 check again? Oh yeah, f4 at the end. I didn't see that coming. Oh my goodness. Right, rook d1 here. Black's got queen g5 and taking the knight. But maybe this line here has a big problem with f4. Seems to be the best I can do, though, is to take that pawn. I guess Black's got 3 pawns and a rook against, like, the piece. Do I have anything other than queen g5? I'm going to just computer check this position for a second because it's beyond me. Minus a million. Knight a2, knight c3. What? Okay, with queen d5, they're saying knight a2, knight c3 here, the computer says. I mean, you would never not play rook e1 because of this. You would make your opponent find this kind of stuff. You know, everybody saying they went to resigned here is correct. I mean, it's just doesn't make any sense. But I see actually the queen's better like this. It must be b4 now. They can never take because of rook b8. King here, we get this with check. Our queen on d6 would get blocked out in this variation. But here, if king b1, queen b3, if king c1, queen a2, and you can leave this in back rank mate. So that leaves king a1, and then there's maybe this check. Queen a5, king b1, queen a3 should be enough. Yeah. The evaluation is minus a bazillion, Urxor. So that means that in this position here against rook e1, I didn't computer check the other moves I played here. I didn't computer check queen g5 or queen d6 or anything like that. But this queen d5, king here, king there's completely forced, right? Because if the king came up to e3, there's knight c2. So king here, that's what we did, Steve. I played knight check here, king here, knight c3. This was my first idea with the queen on d6, so the queen could go to the dark squares and match the bishops and the pawns that are on light squares, right? And do the other half of the work. But that's the difference between me and the computer. I have like a cool idea. The computer instantly sees every option. Because we're going to need to roll our pawns to dark squares, actually the queen gets blocked out by the pawns if she's on this square here. So we actually need the queen to be here and here. And this is the end after knight c3. That's some rough treatment. But, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can't assume that somebody sees that. I can't even assume that white saw it when they resigned here. I guess they were just depressed, period. I mean, they may have seen, like, some of the very, very simplest variations, right? Like, folks, I mentioned that you could go here, here, takes, here, here. And it's, like, completely hopeless for white at a GM level. Maybe even knight a2, because there's no piece that can go attack the knight, actually, right? Rook e1 to a1. Then Blackwood. They don't have time to play d5 and then b4. They have to play b4 to save the knight. Pawn takes, knight takes, bishop c4. Yeah, I wouldn't resign this for white. So black shouldn't get the knight trapped. They should play knight d5 like I first said. This is hopeless for white, but you would play it out as well. I don't know. Guess white just got all depressed. Unlike us, right? We're all high right now. High on our own work.